President Avalos? Vice President Liu? Secretary Perez? Member Bob Arthur?
Present.
Member John Paul Dreyer? Member Zurich Lewis? Member Dr. Sandra Salazar? Student Trustee Daniel Flores Resendez? President Lacey? And Mr. Ruben Smith?
I do. If we could move up item 18.
I'm sorry, we are going to proceed with the way that the current schedule is listed with closed session on first. We do have 2 items on closed session. We have item 1, public employee dismissal, discipline, and release. And this is pursuant to Government Code Section 54957. Additionally, we do have item 2, which is conference with labor negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6. Under that, we have item A, B, and C. Our agency representative for the college is Ms. Dr. Marianne Gallardi, and our attorney is Mr. Andelson, who I know is in the room. And then second, employee organizations are the CCFF and CSCA, along with unrepresented employees, which are our management employees, our contract management employees. And additionally, we will also have an update from Dr. Ed Hernandez in regards to the superintendent compensation related to the presidential search. We will also have confidential employees, child development center teachers, instructional associates, short-term, temporary, and substitute staff. We are moving this up a little bit only because, and it states on here that it would be about 30 minutes. We're anticipating it may be between 45 minutes to an hour in closed session. So if there's any member of the public who would like to address any of the items that are currently listed on our closed session, they may do so prior to the board going into closed session. Nope, nobody. Don't all, line up at once. Okay, seeing that no one has come up to speak on any of these items, we will recess into closed session at this time. Everyone, welcome back. Sorry for taking longer than the 45 minutes to 1 hour, but we do have a couple of report outs. We do have on item number 2C, our presidential superintendent search. The board has decided to have a 1-day interview for the final candidates that will be scheduled for March 15th. So that is a set date. And then there was no other report out, so I do apologize. But the date for the interviews will be set again for Sunday, March 15th. Okay, and is there anything else on that? No, I think that's it. All right, and moving on to the agenda, we asked if anyone wanted to move any items. So item number 18 has been requested to be moved up. It will be the first item that we discuss tonight on our open agenda session. Item 18 is consideration and approval to enter into a second amendment of the bookstore operating agreement with Follett Higher Ed Group, Inc. for the continued management and operation of the Cerritos College bookstore. It is recommended that it be approved tonight, and there is no impact to the general fund. And there is an increase in revenue and commission of approximately $200,000 and a one-time goodwill of $112,000. For the past several years, the total annual commission has been $350,000, or just a bit slightly higher than that. Is there anything else that needs to be added to this? I know that we had talked to Mr. Contreras and also Mr. David Alfatel in regards to this item. Is there anything you'd like to add before we enter into discussion on this item?
Yes, if I may. Actually, the $200,000 in the board item, that was in the overview, and that was the number from last time, but we made some adjustments to the contract. So That number has changed to approximately 180,000
Oh.
because the percentage has been reduced from 15.5% to 15%. And the reason for that reduction was we were also able to accomplish a substantial savings for a margin reduction for e-course books and text packages and so on, which means in the First Amendment, the Follett was able by contract to charge a 30% margin for textbooks and customized books and books with digital access codes and so on. So based on the discussion that occurred at the last meeting, we were able to negotiate that to 25% margin. So new textbooks and digital books, et cetera, will be all at 25%. The impact of that, by the way, just to give you an example, I was working with one faculty member. So there's a particular textbook in poli-sci that sells for $120.50 presently. So this change from 30% margin to 25% margin for this type of book that I just described, instead of $120.50, the price will become $107.68. That's a savings to the student of $12.82 or 10.6% on the textbook price. So individual students buying those sorts of text material will earn that savings, but the top line that would go to student government would be an additional $180,000. And then also, if I may, we've added language in the contract that explicitly defines the term gross profit margin and markup and so on. So those, I think, are the major issues
Okay, great.
from the last time we came forward.
Okay, thank you. And the student raised this to be brought up. Is there anything you'd like to add in terms of your participation?
Yes. First of all, thank you for that update. We definitely did see some improvements, and overall the contract does look great, except there's just one part in 9.4 where the language is still ambiguous, and it reads, Follett shall purchase used textbooks year-round. Follett shall purchase used textbooks adopted for the next academic term in quantity sufficient to meet course requirements at no less than 50% of the retail price. Follett shall purchase used books not adopted for the next academic term or in excess of course requirements at published wholesale price. So it's just following the logic in the way that it's read in new textbooks, that we would like to see a formula in that pricing as well, because it's very ambiguous in the way what retail price means. I mean, whose retail price are we looking at? Is it Follett's or is it a different competitor or the industry standard?
So you're asking for an example in here? I can do that. I can get that done. Thank you.
Okay. John Paul?
If I understand David correctly, if we're lowering the price of new books with, the way you're changing the margin, whatever, like for the example of the political science book, would that be, so the lower price of, is it 109 instead of 120.50 cents? If that's the retail price, then wouldn't the price of the used book also go down?
Yes, correct.
So that it would lower used books as well. So
Correct.
it does benefit students going new and used.
Okay, great. Anything? I know Mr. Cortez has also been working on this. Is there any last minute thing? I think the recommendations that have been made are very good, and in terms of making sure that the language is cleaned up and that the example is provided for the purpose of students understanding it. Anything else you wanted to add to that before we make a motion on this? Okay, yes, I'm sorry, Ms. Perez.
Right, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the work that's been done on this so far. And I think it is a good step in the right direction. And I still have a couple of other suggestions that I would like to see better defined in the agreement. I think the first thing we talked about was the need for an independent audit. And I would like to see an independent audit paid for by Follett. This is a 5-year contract, so at least 2 times there that we would hire an independent auditor to ensure that all the finances as well as the agreement is being followed. And then the second thing is section 6.27 deals with the customer survey. And I would like to see that language strengthened to have the customer surveys published on our college's website and have the college community being able to give feedback on the bookstore as well. So again, it would be information that would be shared not only with the focus groups, but also with the Board of Trustees too, as a receive and file item. This is what's going on with our bookstore. And I think the last thing is just the $30,000 that's going to be given for the library reserves. I just want to make sure that that money is used to support the students' needs, whether it's textbook reserves, software, whatever their needs are in regards to the library. And I want to make sure that we work with our faculty members to educate them that if they have a textbook that they are using in their class, that there is money for the library to purchase. Because as we heard numerous times, many students either cannot afford to purchase a book or they choose not to purchase a book for whatever reasons. So again, I just want to make sure that that $30,000 is being used to actually support our students' needs. So I would just call upon our faculty colleagues, Michelle and Solomon, just to make sure to work with the faculty, because this is a really big plus, I think, for faculty members, because we've often heard that for students to be successful, they need to have the books that you guys are requesting. So again, this is, I think, something that really want to work with our faculty on there. So I know there's a couple other faculty members there too. So please, share this, because this is really good news, I think, for both our students and for our faculty members. So that's it.
Is that a motion?
Okay. I'm
I
sorry,
make the
Mr.
motion, we approve the contract, and I can support the items that
With the
trustee
amendments,
Perez has
right.
mentioned.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'll
Second.
it. Okay, go ahead. Second.
Hold on,
All
what is,
those-
excuse me. So if we approve the contract right now, what is the guarantee that of the language being cleaned up?
That's what we're asking for,
Okay,
yeah. We're asking for the recommendations that have been made by trustee Perez, in addition to the example that you requested for item number, if I'm not mistaken, 9.2, is that correct? Right. 9.4, sorry, and section 9.4.
It's section 10.2 that deals with the audit. So again, a call for an independent audit every other year of the bookstore's agreement and the finances paid for by Follett. And 2 would be the section number 6.27, which deals with the customer surveys.
Okay, great. And, right, and the $30,000 for library reserves. Okay, that's, yeah, all right, great. So we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, great. Again, congratulations to all our staff who I know has been working diligently on this, along with our ASCC and our student trustee, in terms of making sure it's equitable to students, and definitely provides, I think, a positive impact on our student community. So thank you. All right. Moving on to item number 3. We do have an institutional presentation, discussion of Chapter 2 Board Policies. And Mr. Covert of Mr. Spencer Covert of Covert, Parker, and Covert, did I say that right? Will lead a discussion on the following board policies and administrative procedures. Board Policy 2200, Administrative Procedure 2200, Board Policy 2400, AP 2400, Board Policy 2430, and corresponding Administrative Policy 2430. Mr. Colbert.
Well, thank you very much. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. And the presentation title that I picked was The What and the How. And you should all have copies of the presentation, as well as copies for the audience over on the tables. And the what, of course, refers to the board policy itself. And the how refers to the administrative regulations and how the president and the college community, through administrative regulations, implement the board's policy. And I was asked to address these 3 policies in about 10 to 15 minutes, and I'll be pleased to do so. The 2200 series deals with board responsibilities. The 2410 is the process to adopt board policies and administrative regulations. And your college has an excellent flow chart that is online and is part of the board policy and administrative regulations, which is quite clear. And finally, 2430 addresses 2 issues. It deals with the role and responsibility of your college president to execute the policies, as well as has a final paragraph about board members requesting information and whether or not it's of a routine nature or if it's of a more significant nature, in which case board approval, because of the time and energy that's expended in dealing with locating information, is required for board approval. So with that, I would like you to please turn to the next page. And please note that this is not really Spencer on board policies and governance. Instead, I decided to turn to published statements about board policy. So you can see this is from the Community College League. It's the Trustee Handbook, Chapter 6, which deals with board policy. And in the second sentence you see up there as to what is board policy, there's an excellent definition, which is policy is defined as broad statements that set the general direction and standards for acceptable practice. This is very important in terms of what your role is. And you can see here that the League has stated that board policies contain the standards for ethical, legal, and prudent operations in the district. The thing that is important about this for you to follow is that every time you adopt a policy, think about these 4 goals for your policies. The first one is up there, as you see, as noted by the League, is the fact that it's legal, ethical, and prudent. And why is that important? Because ultimately you are the stewards, as your name implies, using the name trustees, to be responsible for legal, ethical, and prudent standards. Then, as part of that, you have an ongoing obligation to be sure that your policies comply with legislative mandates. You have an entire separate role and responsibility with fiscal policies that ensure stability and effective use of funds. And finally, of course, you are ultimately the employer in this district, and therefore your policies must establish standards for employment practices that are fair, legal, and designed to enhance employee performance. Also in this chapter, there's a separate chapter, Chapter 17, the fact that the policy is the voice of the board. And I know that you all know that it's only when you come together in a meeting, be it in closed session or in public open session, that you are acting on behalf of this board. And it is through your policies that you become the voice of the board, where people will know the important values that you have set for your college. Finally, since this also pertains to accreditation, and since your policies do refer to accreditation, I went to the Western Association regarding Standard 4, which is leadership and governance. And this is a rather lengthy statement, but what is really important here, again, is that it sets forth what your roles are and why we have policies. And I was pleased to see here that the very first policy, and why we're really here, as you can see there on line 2, is to promote student success, to sustain academic quality, integrity, fiscal stability, and continuous improvement of the institution. So every time you consider policies for adoption, ask yourself, is this promoting student success? Is this going to sustain academic quality, integrity? Is this policy going to promote fiscal stability? And is it going to promote the continuous improvement of your institution? And with those global statements in mind, that are established, recognized, and serve as the foundation for policy of adoption. Let's go ahead and look at your actual policies here. These policies do follow what you've seen before. They do reference the accreditation standards. From time to time, they do mention education code sections. And I thought it would be best just to take them as they show up in your board policy book as well as online. And so look there at line 7. The board is committed to fulfilling its responsibilities to, and then you see 7 bullet points there. When I looked at those bullet points, I thought to myself, well, you know, these really aren't in some sort of hierarchy. They reflect 7 co-equal important responsibilities. The second responsibility, of course, is to establish policies, and you can see that language that comes from the CCLC that set prudent, ethical, and legal standards and establish the direction of the institution. And then, of course, the very next bullet that you see there is the process that you are involved in at the present time, which is the process of the orderly selection for a new president. And then you see the very next policy, which you're going to see before you, is to delegate power and authority to the president to effectively lead the district. In other words, the board adopts the policy, it hires and holds the president responsible for executing the policy, so then that the president in turn effectively leads the district. Just as important, of course, is fiscal health and stability, because obviously you cannot have student excellence, you cannot have academic excellence if you don't have the fiscal health and stability and a responsible budget that in turn pays for the salaries and provides and maintains the facilities necessary to carry out those policies. Now, that's the basic duties and responsibilities of the board. Next of all, you have some administrative procedures. The administrative procedures, as my title states, is the how this happens. And these administrative procedures recognize, again, that it is the board that is the policy forming body, and that's discussed in sort of between lines 5 and 20. And then if you take your pen and maybe draw a line between line 20 and 21, because then you see the administrative procedures, which are the method by which the president and the president's staff are going to execute your policies. Furthermore, you will note here that typically administrative procedures throughout community colleges are formulated by the campus community and ultimately implemented by the president. And your policy indicates that obviously they need to be consistent with your policy, but at the same time, that is the lead responsibility of the president to ensure that these administrative procedures are carried out, because it is the president who must execute your policies. Following this, sorry, it's a little hard to read out here in the audience. I apologize for the font. Maybe I should have broken this up, but it's pretty clear on your website. And you'll notice that at the beginning, there's a lot of thought been put into this flow chart. It's excellent. And start of process starts there at the bottom. And you have the development or the revision of policies and procedures. In other words, throughout here, and you'll see a little difference as you go, you have the board policies, and then there's a slash and there's procedures. And that's done for a purpose to emphasize the difference between what is a policy statement from the board versus how those policies are going to be administered. You have a very collegial process in how these policies come to the board, which is described here through the college coordinating committee. And then ultimately, you will notice that it is the first reading of revised or new policies. And I only emphasize this because you notice it doesn't say first reading of revised new administrative procedures. Administrative procedures, as these policies are developed, are done through the campus community. And in effect, the first box is through the second review of the procedure through the College Coordinating Committee is the role and responsibility of how administrative procedures are adopted. Then as far as policy adoption, the Education Code does not require a first or a second reading. That's a long-time city tradition, of course, for adoption of ordinances. And you all follow that as well, and most community colleges do, with a first reading. And you'll notice it does not say in this little box at a regular meeting, but in your board policies, it calls out that board policies will be adopted at regular meetings of the board. So you have a first and the second reading, and then you have a posting and the promulgation of that. Now, behind that in your document is AP 2410, which is an administrative procedure talking about administrative procedures. And quite frankly, it is a summary that the flow chart does a much better job, I think, in describing the various steps. So we'll go beyond that, of course.
We're having more committee work done now, like subcommittee work. And so I'm on the board policy subcommittee, and we can also, develop or revise policy in our subcommittee, and I don't see where that is in the flow chart. Am I missing it somewhere? Where does the board subcommittee on board policy?
It's on the very bottom of the right. If you look at the very last sentence under development of revised or new policy procedure, look at the last sentence on the right-hand side.
Is this college coordinating committee?
Says, any employee, student, or member of the public may initiate a review of any policy or procedure by submitting a request or recommendation in writing to the office of the president, superintendent for consideration by the college coordinating committee.
I think it needs, but we're already,
I don't think
we're a
this was-
standing committee.
Right, I think these Mr. Dreyer, I think these were drafted before the subcommittees were created, so these are new, and they probably could just amend it just by adding them then to the policy committee.
Yeah,
That's the
to be more
procedure
clear.
that's being followed. I think it just needs to be updated, but that is the process, and I think the bottom line is, Ms. Perez said, is really the way that you start the process.
I think we do need to look at when we decided to have the policy committee. I think the purpose was to review policy. So we'd have to go back and look at that language.
I think it was review and to develop policy. It's a board policy committee. That's what my understanding was.
Well, we have certain shared governance responsibilities at community colleges, so I think we have to always be mindful of the respective roles so that we have input, and the input takes the college community into consideration in bringing these policies forward to the board. And I believe that's understood by all of us. That's sort of I don't want to call it a unique governance model, but it's certainly a very important governance motto that we follow at the community colleges. Then, if we go on to the next page, we have, in your policies, the flow chart shows up twice, probably letting people know how important that is, so they keep that in mind. But then we get to 2430, which is the delegation of authority to the president superintendent. It's important to remember, as you all know, that you are here serving as a body when you're here as a board in a duly called meeting. But this institution is literally rolling 24/7, as many of you know. And therefore, it's the college president that has that responsibility and the campus community to administer these policies. This policy is important because it sets forth the role of the president, and it also has important language that I've seen in many college presidents' employment contracts. If you look at lines 20 through 24, you will see that it is the president superintendent is expected to perform the duties contained in the job description and fulfill other responsibilities as may be determined in annual goal setting. The job description and goals and objectives for performance shall be developed by the Board of Trustees in consultation with the president superintendent. A very important process that, of course, is pertinent to where you are today in the life of the college. Then finally, many times institutions have had to deal with requests for information. It's very common, and I'm pleased to see that you all have adopted a policy as opposed to sort of a laissez-faire approach to how requests should be handled. And so you see here, if I may, perhaps your question should be addressed to the president. I know one of the trustees had his hand up there.
Yes. And now that we have districts where, we represent certain constituencies in certain areas, and our constituents may have questions regarding the running of the college. And for us to be considered, it's our fiduciary responsibility for the public trust to ensure that things have been done properly. If we cannot tell our constituents that things have been done properly because we're not given information, or a board has to vote for us to have something, how can we tell them with assurance that everything has been done properly or legally if we don't have such assurances? I think this might be even unconstitutional to block board members from finding out what's going on with the college by limiting their access to information.
I'm sorry, Mr. Dare, how does that apply to the policy? I'm not quite sure understanding that. I think that's a completely different and separate item from this particular board policy.
He was speaking about information, like limiting information, and we have a policy. He mentioned it, and maybe he's talking about the other one, but he mentioned it earlier. So that's a real big, legal concern for me, especially to our constituents that have certain concerns, and we're not given information or things aren't followed up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dare. I think the concern has been heard. Do you want to reply to that or move on? I don't know where it pertains to this. I didn't quite get that.
What I wanted to say is it is important that you've addressed this in a policy.
Right.
It's also important the fact that you have a demand upon staff time that is recognized in this policy. And it's also important to note here, which of course is best practices, that the information requested by an individual trustee is shared with all board members, so that all board members have a common basis and understanding. And that's what your policy provides. There's another question from one of your board members.
Sorry, Dr. Salazar.
Could you describe some best policies on how to disseminate that information to all trustees?
Certainly. Typically, that's done through what's known as a Friday package. Not all districts send out packages every Friday. There's a massive amount of information, but typically that would be done, in a reasonable amount of time if it were pertaining to a board meeting, such as when the agenda goes out, so the board would have that information. Sometimes, of course, information may not all be accumulated at that time, but that's pretty typical.
Okay.
I don't know what your administrative process is here, but that is what I commonly see. Not all that, part of that information, of course, then becomes public information as soon as it's distributed to the board. On the other hand, the Brown Act and the Public Records Act recognizes that matters, such as the attorney-client privilege, those items that would go out in a Friday packet or whenever your board materials are distributed are traditionally put in a separate part of the Friday package to emphasize the confidential nature of the information that's being provided.
Thank you, Mr. Covert. All right, you may proceed.
Thank you. I'm really just about wrapped up here with the presentation. Finally, we of course have a administrative procedure on that deals with the delegation of authority that's in more detail as to how the president performs the roles and responsibilities. And I just want to thank you all. You are fortunate in, of course, belonging to an organization that considers these policies on a statewide basis, so that you have model policies, that you're not just sort of starting from whole cloth in what you're putting together. And then, of course, ultimately, they are your policies for your adoption so that you can represent and perform your duties and responsibilities. And I was asked to provide this in a rather limited scope. And I did want you to see that what I've presented is established statements that are in the body of law and governance for community colleges. And I thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Mr. Covert.
Thank
Anyone
you.
else? Okay. All right, thank you. Moving right along on our agenda, the next item is an informational item. Board Advisory Committee activity reports. Board of Trustees will receive a summary report on the committee's activities from the Board Policy Review Advisory Committee, Project Labor Agreement Advisory Committee. So we'll start off with the Board Policy Review Committee. Go ahead.
The Board Policy Advisory Ad Hoc Committee met on Friday, January 16th, and the following item was reviewed. Revisions to BP 2720, Communications Among Board Members. This policy was sent to Coordinating Committee on January 26th, 2015. Coordinating Committee reviewed in compliance with shared governance and policy review procedures. It is agendized as an information item for first reading.
Okay, next item is a project labor agreement. I'm on that policy committee, but I'm going to ask our legal counsel to give us an update on that because I know there was a couple of things that he was working on.
Yes, we met as a board, and I think there were two items that I'm discussing with Tilden Coyle, and should have that done by tomorrow. And then the negotiation process can start in terms of sending it to the unions for their response to our proposed draft agreement. So we're moving along fairly quickly on this now, and thank you all for your participation.
Sorry, did you mean meet as a committee? Because you said meet
Committee.
as a board.
Committee.
No, the committee, the way the process works is the committee is kind of because of the Brown Act issues, the board really can't meet in closed session to discuss these items. And so creating a subcommittee to do this is the only way to do it. To give you an example, Rancho Santiago Community College recently passed a PLA, and they were sued by the ABC for meeting in closed session on the as a violation of the Brown Act. So it's not a settled area of the law, but in order to just be prudent and do the right thing, that's why you have the PLA ad hoc subcommittee that negotiates. And then once there's a form of an agreement that's acceptable to the committee, then it'll come back to the board for approval, obviously after it's been negotiated with the union. Yes.
As a member of the committee, it would have some final touches have to be done, and then it'll be sent to the committee members, and then decide if it's ready to go to the start negotiations. That's where I believe we're at.
Correct.
Okay, so that is the report. We will be meeting one more time. And, I would hope that the information that is discussed at the committee would be staying within the committee. It's my understanding that some of that information has gone out, unfortunately. And I guess my concern at this point is whether or not, and I guess this is a question for legal counsel, whether or not the integrity of the committee itself has been jeopardized in terms of what we're trying to accomplish.
Well, I think it's important to keep our discussions confidential for a number of reasons. One, obviously, is Brown Act. If other board members get the information and it starts to be, giving opinions given, then you have the opportunity to violate the Brown Act, and that's something we don't want to do. Secondly, we certainly don't want to disclose the district's position to, especially until if there's a final agreement to give to them. So I would just ask that all that information remain confidential so that we can protect the integrity of the process.
So what ramifications do we have if it does go out? What is the board doing?
Well, my understanding is that it's somehow it was leaked and it's on an internet site. And so it, obviously conveys, and it's not the final version. It was a prior draft that was published on the internet. So, it's just a matter of us now trying to make sure as we go forward that doesn't happen again.
Okay, great, thank you. Moving on to comments from the audience. At this time, we do have a few cards from members of the audience who wanted to bring up some items. First individual is Aldemar Sanchez. And we'll be speaking on student activity assistance, student activities clerk, and budget of ASCC and Senate meeting.
Hello, everyone. I'm Aldemar Sanchez. I'm the Senate Pro Temp. Sorry, I would take off my beanie, but it's been a long day and my hair is terrible. I wanted to talk to you guys about something that was on the agenda the last meeting, and it was the student activities assistant and the job that was paying $14 to the students. One thing that was said is by Marissa Perez is that this is something that should go to the Senate so we can discuss it. And we did put on our agenda. We spoke about it today, and we spoke about it a little bit last week. And it was a huge concern for the students. We actually put it on the agenda for next week as well, so we can talk about it a little bit more. But we also had something come up with our meeting where we made student activity clerk jobs. And from what we've been talking about in Senate, and it was pretty much the same description as what a student activities assistant and a clerk were to do from what we've been told. And the jobs that we made, these jobs are only getting paid $9.93, which are a lot lower than what the student activity assistant jobs are getting paid. And it kind of is not, we feel like it wasn't fair because we didn't deny this because these are student jobs and it's great that we're having these, but we feel like the job descriptions are kind of the same thing, but yet the other students are only going to get paid $4 less. And that's a huge concern to me because I am a senator and I'm here for the students, and it's kind of not fair that they're going to be getting paid different wages. Also, another thing that during the meeting, Dr. Johnson said that it's for student engagement and student involvement to get the student activities assistant job. And when I talked to in Senate, the first meeting last Wednesday they said it was just going to be work inside of AACC. And so there was two different things. And the meeting today, they said it was for student engagement and student involvement. And then President Yellow said that what he's gonna do is go out at night and talk to students to get involved. And that's what the job description, he said, was about. And my concern is that they're saying that this isn't a job for president and vice president, but those are the duties for the president and vice presidents to go out and recruit students to join student government. And the jobs the job description is the same thing. So I feel like the students need to know which one is which. Are they doing the work in AACC, or are they going out and recruiting students, which is what the president and vice president should do without getting paid. Another thing is our AACC budget. We have allocated $60,000 for our leadership conference. And today we're presented by Dr. Gill that we spent $82,832.58 for leadership conference. And then that was $22,832.58 over budget. And one thing that I feel is that this is the students' money, and this was brought out of different accounts. And we did get presented those accounts today. But it was after the fact that the money was used. It was coming out of the student fees for conference, ACC 250 account, fall awards banquet remaining balance, recreation and events, homecoming remaining balance, innovative funds, and student services funds. And I feel like before we go into these accounts and take out money, the Senate should be let known that we're going to do this because it's a student's money. And even though like the fall awards banquet and homecoming have already passed and there is money still left in there, the Senate should be let known that this money is going to be used, because it doesn't make sense like taking money out of things without letting us know. And the bookstore contract that you guys approved, that's awesome. But again, the students, we didn't know what was going on. The book contract wasn't presented to us. We had no input in this, and I felt like we had a lot to say in it. And also, just going on a better note, today, next week, the QSA Club, the Queer Straight Alliance Club, we're going to be having a marriage booth out in Falcon Square. So we're going to be promoting equal marriage on campus. So if you guys can please let everyone know to come out, anyone who wants to get married, whether they want to, we had some students last year marry themselves, or we had some crazy weddings. It was fun. So it's going to be next week, February 11th and 12th in Falcon Square from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. So please let everyone know to go out and support. And yeah, as a student, please kind of look into what's going on in student activities, because it's a huge concern for myself and a lot of the other senators. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Sanchez. Next, we have Mr. Victor Villalobos, who will also be talking on Student Senate ASCC Admin Assistance.
Hi. Good evening, members of the board. My name is Victor Villalobos, and I am a student senator and faculty student liaison here at Cerritos College. I am here to speak in regards to the administrative assistant positions that were appointed to ASCC president and vice president. It was on the agenda item it was an agenda item on today's student senate meeting that was filled with healthy discussion. So much so that it will be on the agenda again for next week's senate meeting. I invite members of the board to attend the meeting and hear the discussions the student body has on this issue. Lastly, I would like to acknowledge Dr. C, Miles, Charles, and the whole Senate body for their participation in today's discussion, and to Daniel Gomez for supporting those like myself that are not 100% versed in parliamentary procedure. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Villalobos. Next, we have Mr. David Fabish, who will be talking on comments.
Thank you. I have to confess to a little awkwardness in coming up to speak with you. You know, I think most of you, that I am a dean and I'm the president of ACME. And it just is awkward in those roles to come to you to complain about you. But there were a series of statements made at the last meeting that portrayed members of ACME in an unfairly bad light, and I need to address them. And you know, I admire actually the manner in which these student speakers addressed their concerns. It struck me as thoughtful and respectful, and they brought forward to you serious concerns, and in a way that did not impugn the character of anyone. You know, I've been on this college campus for about 25 years, and that is the way we work through conflicts in general. We are colleagues and we are friends, and often we fight, but in the end we respect each other. And I think actually everyone in this room embraces that our sole purpose in which we are united is to serve students. You know, this issue that has just been presented was brought forward by the student trustee Daniel Flores Resendez, and you know, in thinking of his comments, and of the flurry of comments that followed, what struck me actually was that the student trustees' comments, as pointed as they were in some ways, and as critical, were more balanced and respectful than those of some of the elected members of the board. So I admire and wish to acknowledge that. See, it's the reason really why it's awkward for me to be here is because by the nature of my job now as a dean, I need to practice the discipline of being restrained. And so it's not typical for an employee of my role, a middle manager, to tell the authority of the campus that you have offended my constituency in ways that are just not fair. But 3 statements at the last board meeting just plain crossed the line. So when, for example, Trustee Dreyer said that he did not trust staff, I hope you all understand why Dr. Contreras would have been compelled to address it. I mean, I think we understand what it means not to trust someone. I don't think that Mr. Dreyer was saying that he feared him. I don't think he was even implying that he lacked confidence in their professionalism. It is an expression of doubt of one's integrity. And in my fiduciary role as the president of ACME, that's something that I need to address. I mean, the core of my message actually is practice what I've had to practice. Restraint. Treat the people that you oversee with dignity, and I would say with compassion, and with respect. See, as a dean, I've learned that rather than being freer to speak, I am more constrained. And this is a paradoxical aspect of leadership, that it is a paradoxical aspect of leadership, that leadership is not expressed in what we give voice to, but in what we refrain from saying. And when we do speak, with the care and the caution and the humility in the choice of words that we use when we do speak. And humility is important because sometimes, a bitter lesson that adults wrestle with is that sometimes we are wrong. And on many occasions, I'm afraid that the members of the Board of Trustees have reached conclusions that are based on without any factual basis. Later, there was, I think this was a discussion concerning the ASC hourly wages. Again, it was Trustee Dreyer who indicted the entire hiring process. And when he does so, I wonder, well, who and where was the failure? And I wonder, was the failure with Dr. Galarte? Or was it with Dr. Flores Church? Was it with Director Barrett Morris? See, I know these people to be professional, knowledgeable, gracious, filled with integrity. And I know that the processes that they develop and implement are consistent with legal requirements. And so I wonder, based on with the little bits of information that was available at that point, how could the entire HR staff and its processes be indicted?
Mr. Fabish, with all due respect, you have gone over your time limit. I'll give you 30 seconds to wrap it up. I realize that you have a lot to say, and I'm sure it's more than 30
I
seconds.
do, and this last part concerns you, President Avalos. Our hearts for our students are in the same place. And in your frustration with what you encountered on January 19th and trying to get a son into English 100, you encountered what I encounter every day in my role as a dean. But some of your words were also unrestrained. If you look at the transcript, you'll find words like our process is being ridiculous and our process is being a failure. And now, if there are things for me to improve personally, it is my culture and the culture of this college to understand that and to embrace it. But the managers of Acme are not yours to kick. So I appreciate that you've allowed me to overstep your time. And again, all that I'm asking for is that you treat us with the same courtesy and dignity and respect that you'd give to any other employee. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and I just want to, I guess, have the opportunity to correct a little bit of what you stated without getting into a discussion about it, but just to say that, I do apologize that it was misconstrued and taken in a negative light, because I think when I said we, I wasn't talking about Acme. I was talking about we as a board, and, ultimately, we do set those policies, and I'm thinking of we as in terms of failing, in terms of being able to provide perhaps more support to facilitate the process itself, not necessarily of you or even of Acme or anyone in a position to make those changes. Ultimately, it's the board. So I apologize if that was taken in a negative light. That was certainly not my intent. So know that my apology is sincere, and it was more about a reflection of us as board trying to facilitate things for you as employees. So I will leave it at that. Moving right along on to consent calendar, items 5 through items 15.
What about 16?
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I just say 15, 16? I apologize. Oh, I'm sorry. 13. Oh,
13.
Sorry. I
13.
overskipped it. So items again, 5 through 13.
So move.
Great. Thank you. And we have a second from Mr. Arthur, correct? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. Item number 14, which is an informational item, has to do with College Coordinating Committee minutes.
Move. Receive and file.
Great, thank you. Can I get a second? Second. Great, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item number 15, which is also first reading, revised board policy of 2720, which is communication among board members. It is recommended that this policy be adopted.
Receive and file or move, whatever works.
Okay, any other comment on this? Do I get a second?
Could we
I'm sorry.
ask if it'll come back for second reading unless the board has any comments, so everybody feel good?
So what's the proper way to state this?
Well, I just, it's
To come back?
Do you have anything that you would like to have revised or added or?
But how do I move this, say to receive and file and have it come back for second reading?
No, it'll come back automatically. I'm just asking the board right now, is there anything that you would like us to adjust before it comes back for second reading?
No,
There's
for
no
me.
motion, there's no action on this, but I just want to hear feedback, as we did with the policy last week.
I have a question.
Yes,
The
Mr. Arthur.
changes in this policy, they were reviewed by the Board Policy Committee, and this is what they're recommending? Or this has gone through all the process?
It has,
is-
right. It went to the policy committee first.
Yes.
And then we sent it to coordinating.
Yes.
And coordinating changed just kind of the location of a sentence, and now it's coming back for,
Thank you.
coming to the board for the,
Receive and file?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. Next item is administrative matters, which is item 17, and at this point, it's, I'm sorry.
16.
Gosh, I'm sorry, guys, I'm tired.
You don't want to do 16
Apologize.
tonight.
I know, so sorry. Item 16, which is conference reports. Trustee Arthur and Mr. Lewis and Dr. Liu will share information on the 2015 California Community College League Annual Legislative Conference.
I brought some information, already made a copy, and so it's quite a lot. you can read at your leisure time. It's all about state budget and about those planning. So you can read about it on your desk. Thank you.
I'll take it a little bit further. The California Community College League has gone high-tech. These are the two programs, but if you go to their website, you can find the two programs listed with all the sessions that were provided for both the effective trustee workshop and the legislative conference. The programs are listed there, and all of the handouts for all of the sessions that are listed in the programs are available for your casual reading. Additionally, I brought back with me two documents that you can also find on the website, both from the League, Introduction to Fiscal Responsibilities, and the 2015 updated trustee handbook that, well, he's left, Spencer Covert mentioned earlier. These are also on the website. And Dr. Liu mentioned that we met with our legislative representative members, Calderon, Garcia, Rendon, and although he doesn't represent us, Assembly Member Medina, who is the chair of higher education, where we discussed our positions on the state facilities bond. The Assembly, or Sacramento, the Assembly, and hopefully the Senate are seriously looking at the possibility of authoring or drafting a bond measure themselves for the ballot, perhaps, or even taking action in 2016 if there aren't enough signatures gathered, or at least getting ahead of a ballot measure put on by the people. And as well as our discussions on the stability for community colleges and funding, CTE funding, our four-year degree programs at community colleges, and of course concurrent enrollment. It was interesting, as they always are. The sessions were interesting, as many of them are. The most, I thought the most beneficial one of which I attended dealt with the community colleges at, what was that? The community college that dealt with how they, the veterans assistance that they provide at the community colleges in Northern California. And we had the opportunity to not only compliment on the programs that they provide their veterans, but showcase what Cerritos College does for our veterans programs. And I think we kind of stole their thunder. We really bragged about what we do for our veterans, and there were more questions as the end of the session about what Cerritos College is doing, or as many questions about what Cerritos College is doing as there were questions with what the other colleges are doing. It was pretty enjoyable from that aspect.
A couple of other things I want to add. During the course of the legislative conference, Dr. Liu and I also attended our respective advocacy groups, where you attended the Asian Pacific Islander caucuses, and I attended the Latino caucuses and became a member of that. Additionally, during the legislative meetings with each of the legislators, we talked about concurrent enrollment or dual enrollment, and each of them had a similar vein, basically saying that Assemblyman Holden from Pasadena will be reintroducing legislation to allow community colleges to have a lot more leeway in changing the models of how we have concurrent enrollment, whether it be as a middle college that we host students from high school on campus here, or whether we allow classes on their campus so that they can take it for both high school and college credit. And that's something, again, that helped me personally when I was at high school, that we had a partnership with Cal State Fullerton to have general ed classes on our campus, and that's allowed me to now be graduating Biola in 3 years instead of 4. So being able to expand on those programs to high schools, not just for at-risk students, but for those that want to get on an accelerated course is something that I hope we can all support as a board to bolster those programs here at Cerritos in upcoming years. We also had a quick meeting with State Senator Mike Morrell, who's been a good friend of mine for 5 years, and just a quick meeting to discuss that and put that on both sides of the aisle up in the state legislature and both sides of the chamber. So other than that, it was definitely an eye-opening experience, a fire hose of information that you can all review at your own leisure. Thank you.
I have a question. I do notice that this item, the information item conference report, seems to be a new recurring item. I was wondering, for the sake of efficiency of the meetings, could we have that information given to us as part of the board book, like the other information items? It seems that some of the information shared does kind of overlap with report and comments from district officials. I don't know if that's possible. I'm not really sure what the rationale is to have a conference report on the agenda.
Yeah, no, I think, if I'm not mistaken, my understanding is that it was requested that it be a specific board item to allow all of the members of the board to hear what our board members experience and to share back with the board in terms of, this is money that the board is spending to allow folks to go to these conferences, learn from these conferences, and bring information back from the conferences. And I know our legal counsel also wants to add some information.
Actually,
And
tonight
also
is a pretty important night. You're also going to be at the next agenda item, which kind of leads right into it, is the accreditation report. And one of the things that in the accreditation report that you're committing to is to sharing this kind of information, because that's one of the things that the board was criticized for. And so in here, one of the recommendations is actually to provide the sharing of information of events, of seminars that each one of you go to. I think this was right in line with what you've committed to doing in this accreditation
I'm just
report.
wondering, can it be shared like the other information items to be in a written format?